Welcome on to the next edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. Brilliant to have you with us. Today we're talking about something that I think happens to all of us at some stage in our marathon career, and that is getting smacked by the wall at some point in a marathon. We all experience it, and that is one of the questions on today's episode of the podcast. We also are going to be talking about running faster at a lower heart rate. We're going to be talking about dealing with excessive fatigue and how much time we need to take off after big events as well. My name is Brad Nadauld. We've got the coach, Lindsey Parry, with us. Lindsey, nice to touch base once again. Are you well?
I'm very well, Brad, and I've just noticed that I'm not wearing my glasses, and nor are you, so you might want to put yours on so you can see what you're doing. But other than that, I am pretty good, thank you.
I've made the font on my screen much bigger, so I'm okay now. Thanks for checking on me. The challenges of getting old. Can't remember. The problem is my eyes aren't bad. My arms just aren't long enough. That's what the problem is.
Lindsey, you didn't tell me you were Scottish.
Exactly. First question is a video one. And don't forget, if you have a question that you'd like answered, all you need to do is click on the link that's in the description of this podcast on the podcast player you're listening on, or you can click on the link in the description of the video that you're watching. And this one, I quite like this question. Lindsey, here we go.
Hello, my name is Achal Shah. I'm 60 years old. Recently, I ran my first marathon in 15 years, and I think I did okay. However, between mile 20 and 21, I hit the wall, and what I felt was I slowed down suddenly, and for a really brief period of time, I felt chilly and lightheaded, but that quickly passed. What's going on physiologically in the body when this happens? That's my first question. I do most of my running on an empty stomach, and all my training, I do it at an easy pace. Going forward for my next marathon, what changes should I make to stave off hitting the wall again? I'd appreciate and thank you for all the work that you're doing. Bye.
I love that, Lindsey. And first of all, Achal, congratulations. What a comeback. First marathon in 15 years at 60 years old. That is pretty impressive. Well done. And hopefully that's the first of many on this comeback. The answer to Achal's question, Lindsey.
Yeah, so look, these things are not too different to when you go and see the doctor, and we have to look at the symptoms to try and narrow down the exact cause. And in this case, I don't have to go too broad on this answer because it's one of the few times where all the relevant information is provided. So it's a good question. And the first clues, the lightheadedness and the goosebumps, that's a really good clue that this is a nutritional issue and nothing else. So when you blow in races, you want to analyze, how did I feel? So we can figure out what went wrong. And then correct those. So other forms of blowing will come in, like just feeling really flat and not having any strength left in the legs, or having very sore legs, or cramping in the legs. This one is very different. That like kind of slowing down, not feeling like you've got no power, but just like that forced slowdown, and then to feel a bit lightheaded, dizzy, and the goose flesh. That's real classic. You have just run out of carbohydrates in particular. Now, the amazing thing about the human body is that we were designed to survive, and we were designed to survive through different types of stresses. So while we have a really good, efficient process of burning fat and carbohydrates, and we want small amounts of carbohydrates to burn large amounts of fats, when the body runs out of those carbohydrates, it would be a catastrophe in terms of our abilities to survive if we had no mechanism around it. So we've effectively got two mechanisms around that, and to guard and protect ourselves, essentially. The first is that your body will essentially shut down and make you feel worse than you are. So before you actually run out of carbs, that's why there's some dizziness, there's the pins and needles. The body's like really dropping down that intensity so we can use up the carbohydrates slower. So that's the one thing that it's doing. But secondly, it's buying itself some time, because we can then physically start to break down our own muscle protein so that we can get the small carbon structures, the carboxyl groups that we need to burn fat for energy metabolism from our own body. And then once the body starts to produce that, you will start feeling a little better. However, the body doesn't want to chow all of the muscle protein, because we need that. We want muscle. We don't want to break down muscle unnecessarily. So it's really not going to let you get back to feeling fantastically. And that's why when people talk about the fact that being fat adapted, etc., and you can perform better, well, perhaps in races that last for days, that is true. But for races where we want to maintain a relatively high intensity of exercise, that's simply not true. We need carbohydrates, preferably in the form of muscle glycogen, so that we can continue to exercise at a relatively high intensity over a long period of time. And that's ultimately one of the key things to a successful marathon. It's one of the reasons why marathons, above all others, are so hard to nail, because the relative intensity for that period of time is quite high. And so it requires this like real synergy of getting our nutrition right, getting our training right, getting our pacing right, and being strong enough to be able to keep pushing our muscles for that length of time. So that is your issue, is nutrition. And so there are two things that need to change, really. The first is that you shouldn't continue to train exclusively on an empty stomach, okay? You do want to train and practice what you're going to do on race day, because the gut is very trainable. And that, again, is a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they don't train for it. They get to race day, and suddenly you're taking all sorts of energy things, Gatorade in the Northern Hemisphere races, Powerade and Coke in South Africa. But you're suddenly taking gels and sweet stuff. You're not used to it. You start to feel nauseous, but you need to train the gut, and you are aiming to get to roughly around 1 gram of sugar per kg of body mass on race day. So that will give you a rough idea of how much sugar in total you want to spread out across the amount of time that you are going to be running. But yours is a pure nutritional issue. So improve your nutrition habits during training, and then execute that on race day.
Brilliant. Great question, Achal. Thank you so much for that. Lindsey, another question that is also marathon related, but it's post-marathon. And it is from Harish. Harish says, I'm 60 years old, just completed a marathon. Want to know, how long should I take to recover from such a race? And when should I get back to running and training? And number two, what kind of training should I do once I restart my training? As part of my lesson learned, I thought of starting strength training a week after the race, and then start to do some easy hills tempo, short bursts about 2 weeks after. Is this being optimistic or reckless?
Yeah, so Harish, as we get older and we do things like marathons, we probably need to extend that recovery time. And for marathons and longer that we race, and I know now the fact that I have to clarify that just tells you how crazy the running culture is in my home country, South Africa, because people actually run marathons as training. But ultimately, how hard you run that marathon does determine exactly how long those rest periods must be afterwards. Now, I like to work on a 3-week cycle. What we do in that 3 weeks is important. And of course, on one of our recent podcasts, we were talking about this idea that when we're getting older, we are in this state of degeneration, and time out of the sport actually impacts us more than when we were young. In other words, we lose more. So you do get into a trap of going, well, I need more recovery time, but if I take longer, I'm going to lose a lot of the fitness that I built up. Okay. So we do try to work on a 3-week cycle of returning to full training, But how do we make the decisions of what we're going to do in those 3-week cycles? So we first assess the damage that was done. How do we assess the damage that was done? The first 3 days post-marathon will give you all the information that you need in terms of the damage that you've done to yourself by doing that marathon plan. So how sore are my legs on day 1, 2, and 3? But more importantly is, how is that soreness changing? What day, on day 1, 2, or 3, does that pain peak before it starts to improve? And if it's peaking on day 2, that's a fairly normal delayed onset of muscle soreness. If we're peaking on day 1 and getting better from day 2, that means that we didn't completely ruin ourselves in the marathon. And if we're peaking on day 3 or longer, means we did like a special kind of damage. And then we really need to do proper intervention so that we don't start too soon and then pick up overuse injury. Okay. So if we are fairly normal, in other words, by day 3, we are starting to improve, then it's 1 week of very little to no activity. So maybe some walking, perhaps a little bit of swimming, but really for that first week, very, very little activity. In week 2, we can start adding in strength training. And the reason I'm using inverted commas, and for those that are listening and not watching, I'm using inverted commas, strength training, is because we can start doing the movements so that we start getting our proprioception, coordination back, but we don't want to be adding too much resistance. And so these will be body weight exercises with a lower rep range or number of repetitions and maybe fewer sets. But we're focusing on the mobility aspect and just getting through the movements rather than doing it for the actual improvement of the strength training. And we can do non-impact forms of exercise like cycling and swimming, gentle rowing. But I find rowing is perhaps a little bit too hard just by the nature of how the machines work. So I'd probably steer away from that. In week 3, we can start running easy and start increasing the resistance in the strength training. And then you can get back to peak training. Now, if we are sore on, or more sore on day 3 and 4, we need to push all of that stuff out by a minimum of half a week, probably a week. So you're probably only going to get to normal training at week 4. And then cross training will play a bigger role in the early bit so that we can maintain the health benefits of exercise, but we just make sure that we allow the muscles to improve fully. So the mobility and the strength, all that stuff gets pushed out by another week, but the going for walks, the swimming and the cycling become options that you can do just to get some exercise going. And of course, if we are sore for one day and by day 2 we're already getting better, you can pull everything a week forward and you can be going normally in week 3, and week 2 can then be that kind of phase where you reintroduce the running and build everything up.
I'm having a chuckle to myself because we're using the word normal and marathon recovery in the same sentences. People don't think we're normal, that's for sure, if we're running marathons. But yeah, that is perfect advice. Thank you for that question, Harish. Don't forget, if you have a question you would like answered, just pop it into, or click on the link that's in the description to this podcast and video. You can ask your question there. We do filter the video ones up to the top. Lindsey, a question from Desmond. Desmond says, I'm a 55-year-old runner. I've been running for a few years. I cannot for the love of me run a decent marathon and would like to get some help in that area. I recently jumped on a marathon program. It's not one of ours, by the way. He says, but feels like it's too much to me, leaving me tired for a day or two, and then I need to get into bed as early as possible to be able to keep up with the program. I've not enjoyed the program, still on it, but it's coming to an end. His best time is 6 hours, and he would like to improve that. He says he has used one of our programs in the past, but he found that the pace of the marathon program that he purchased was too fast for him. And he just really says the program he's on now has got 3 days of running and then a long, slow distance on the weekend. He says the program is trying. What advice can you give Desmond on getting stronger and faster so that he can reach his marathon goal and have a pretty decent marathon? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, so there's probably a little bit of the same mistake that he made last time, because a 3-day-a-week plan actually sounds, on the face of it, quite sensible for someone like him, giving him that extra time for recovery. But he's still pushing himself into quite a deep hole basically every time he trains, it sounds like. And so the plan that he purchased through us was too fast for him. And he really should have either gotten hold of us through our support platform, or perhaps gotten onto a package that allowed him to have a discussion with a coach, because that's very easily rectified. And even if you're on a plan that's on paper the pacing is too fast for you, the platform does allow you to plug in your own thresholds, which we can help you to calculate, and that then will make sure that you are doing the runs at the right pace for you. And that's the kind of crux of my answer here, is that I feel like that's still not happening, even with the new plan, and even with the increased recovery time, because each session is pushing you into too deep a hole. You are effectively spending all your time recovering from sessions you are doing too hard. And I think as soon as you're doing that, you actually can't recover adequately. So you're also not improving. Your ability to tolerate that amount of work is not improving. And of course, because it's a marathon plan, there is a steady progression. So even if you are just keeping your nose above water, you can't get your head out the water, because as your body adapts a little bit, you just do more. And so to allow your body to adapt with the plan, you've got to go slower, and you do need to probably add in some walk breaks. So that's the immediate thing that I would go to here. Is like, I would go to something like a run 4 minutes, walk 1 minute, because it's a theme that you just run too hard. And I think this is one way of really making sure that you dial back and recover, or do less damage in the actual run, which then means that you have enough time between the sessions to recover. I would definitely have a look at nutrition, make sure that you are in fact getting enough nutrition. The thing you are doing well is you are getting extra sleep, but you are doing that, otherwise you wouldn't, never mind cope with a plan, sounds like you wouldn't cope with life. So that is one good thing you are doing in response, but we should be able to get you to a point where normal amounts of sleep for you, and that's, I must be careful when I use these things, because we do have slightly different sleep recovery requirements. So nutrition, sleep, intensity of training is critical. And then strength training, I don't know how much you are or aren't doing, but as your general theme of not having done a marathon well and having struggled for years, I feel like strength training is another angle that you need to use to really allow you to be stronger towards the back end of marathons. But what's going to be very important in terms of just letting you enjoy the process and cope with the process is getting your intensities right. That's really important.
Cool, Desmond. Thank you very much for that question. We really appreciate it. Lindsey, question from Anshin. Anshin's been training with us in the build-up to the Cape Town Marathon, and she said she has loved it. She's loved the foot core routines that we put together. She said she's feeling so much stronger, which is brilliant. And her question, she says, although my VO2 max is 39, I am relatively fit. I still really struggle to run even a kilometer without regular walk breaks. My slow runs are really slow. She's between 7:30 and 7:50 minutes per K, but her heart rate remains rather high, averaging around 176-ish. I walk every 600 to 700 meters to get the heart rate down to about 145. That drops relatively quickly before running again. She has been running since September 2022, but lived a fairly inactive lifestyle before that. Anything else that she can do to keep her heart rate lower apart from walking often?
Yeah, so again, we really stuck on this fixation with speed and what's considered slow and fast. So firstly, the paces that she's running at now aren't that slow, okay? And compared to the average running population around the world, it's just not slow. So, it's good enough to train for and finish a Comrades Marathon, which is basically one of the hardest races in the world. So we really have to get people away from this thought of fast and slow. What we are seeing clearly here is that the intensity of those runs is still probably too high for her easy runs. And so it's a question of intensity rather than a question of speed. And your biggest lever to improve the speed at which you do your easy runs is to make sure that your easy runs are done at the right intensity. If you do them at the right intensity, your easy runs will get faster, but that shouldn't be the focus here. The focus should be on doing the easy runs at the right intensity. Okay. So I also want to go on to the next step and just tell you that your VO2 max on your watch is garbage. I don't know what your actual VO2 max is. And hopefully that's not a measured number, because if that's a measured VO2 max, then that is telling us that your aerobic capacity is low. Okay, and if your aerobic capacity is low, that is why you are struggling to run very far without having to take walk breaks. But I suspect strongly at that number that is a watch VO2. Otherwise, activities of daily living will be fairly trying at 39. So that's number one. Number two, on your heart rate, a very good variable to use for controlling intensity, but we must make sure that it's an accurately measured number. So that's the first step in this equation. Is that a wrist-based, or is that with a chest strap? And if it's not on a chest strap and you want to use heart rate to control your intensity, that is what I would do. I'd go out and get a chest strap so that you can do this properly and get accurate numbers. And then number two, many athletes rev higher. So in other words, heart rate response is fairly unique. Even with that in mind, it does sound like you are running at way too high intensity given those numbers of the heart rate. However, there are some things we can do to try and determine what the right heart rate is for you individually to train at to keep your runs easy. Probably the easiest way to do that is to head out and do a 5K time trial. Run the best time that you can run at this moment in time with your current fitness, and we'll take that average heart rate that you have and give you an approximation of your threshold. And then it will allow us to work out a heart rate range that you should target, so that if you go outside of that heart rate range, then you can do your walk breaks. But just because your heart rate is a bit higher than people around you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But 170 obviously isn't a great number. The one piece of good news I must give you from this answer, though, is that your heart rate comes down really quickly when you start to walk. So that is a good sign. That tells me we really can get you strong aerobically if we just train in the right way. So let's make sure you've got the right equipment. Let's make sure that you're working with the right heart rate. And then let's dial in on the right intensity and stop worrying about the pace that you're running at. And that will then help you to go longer without walking. We might never eradicate the walk break, but that's okay, because walking is a very good way to do this. But we will try to extend those running periods and reduce the frequency of the walk breaks.
Yeah, Lindsey, please don't ever take away my walk breaks. It's one of the few joys I have in my life. Please. I love the walk breaks. I think the only reason I run is because I'm allowed to walk, to be honest. So, Lindsey, question from Carol. Carol's been training with us for quite a while, and she said, morning, Brad, I've been trying to get consistency back in my strength training. I've seen and felt the benefits of the online strength training during lockdown. She ran her fastest 10K and 21K times ever during that period. She says, having faced difficult times over the last 18 months, I've had to learn to listen to my body and to be kind to it, something that I'm not used to doing. I've been doing one round of strength on a Monday before my monthly time trial, and on the Tuesday morning, and then 2 rounds on the Monday. She's racing on the weekend. Is this okay with her trying to up her consistency? Let's talk about it. So Carol's obviously talking about like the week of a race or the week of a hard like time trial. What should we be doing with our strength training during those periods? Do we dial it back? Do we keep it going as per normal?
So we generally do time trials in a recovery week. So we're trying to build some freshness so that we can get a good result and see if we are tracking and improving. And so I would look at doing a less. So we typically do a light band and mobility session and maybe some foot core in the week of those time trials. And then in race week, we'll do even less. So the one thing she says, she does 2 sessions on a Monday and
2 rounds. Let me just jump in there. I'm presuming she's talking rounds as in reps in the strength class, because we
as in sets,
as opposed to doing 2 sessions. I'm presuming it's the reps as opposed to sessions.
Yeah, and that would be absolutely fine. Again, I would still drop the frequency in the week. So for the Monday, the lighter session and 2 rounds is absolutely fine. And then on the Wednesday, I would not do the strength session, but do the foot core part of that. That's still okay. Or do some mobility, but don't do the strength training. Let your body recover for the next cycle so that you can get the most out of your strength training during the loading weeks. And then in the recovery and race weeks, we want to dial that down and give you the freshness and bounce in your muscles so that you can see improvement as you go through a training cycle.
Lindsey, it was your dad, I think it was, you were telling me about that he struggles to do a whole session, so he's doing them in like little micro bits. And I've been trying to, because that's one of my sort of downfalls, is just not getting to a 45-minute strength session. And like every time the kettle boils, I need to do 5 squats. That's sort of doing that throughout the week as opposed to doing one full session, is that okay?
Yeah, so it does work. It's a question, just like in running, where we're working on different components. We can't work on quad strength every day, even if we chop up the strength training. So we'll work on different components of strength through the week. So if you take 1.5 hours of strength training or 2 sessions and cut that up into 4 or 5 20-minute segments, whatever that is, that you get across all the exercises, we'll split that up into maybe upper body versus lower body, or different muscle groups in the lower body on different days. And we can split up the strength versus the mobility. So maybe if you cut those sessions in half, so instead of doing 2 sessions a week, you're doing 4 sessions a week. Perhaps you could go strength, mobility as an example. So you would have to cut them up in a different way so that you get to all the elements that you're trying to get to, but not repeatedly doing the same elements day after day. Otherwise, you're going to have the same lack of recovery and adaptation that we get when the run frequency is too often or too hard, or at the wrong intensity.
Brilliant. Lindsey, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. If you would like to submit yours, what you can do is just click on the link in the podcast player that you're listening on, or in the description under this video, and you can submit your question there. Do know that we do filter the video questions to the top. We love seeing and hearing you on these podcasts and videos. So please do submit your questions. We look forward to catching up again soon. As always, Lindsey, thanks for your time. Much appreciated, and we'll catch up again next week.
Okay, brilliant. Cheers, Brad.